We have learned about Dorothy Stang, Brother James, and Dorothy Day. Each of these people choose to live their faith in ways that contribute to the societies where they live, yet they do not all follow the same strategies. Using Stephen Pope's models for faith in action, we can describe the approach taken by Sister Dorothy and Brother James as the stewardship model, and the approach taken by Dorothy Day as the hospitality model. Christians turn to Scripture for guidance as they implement both of these models. They also find precedent for these practices in Christian tradition or in the wisdom they glean from the societies where they live. They each operate within social contexts framed by law, social institutions, and cultural values. Moving forward, our consideration of these two models focuses on the U.S. context, where we find constitutional protection for the free exercise of religion, a relatively robust civic sector, a fair degree of cultural support for the charitable endeavors of religious organizations, and some political support for their work. We begin with the stewardship model. One of the earliest examples of the stewardship model comes from Saint Benedict. He established monasteries where people who wanted to make Christian teachings their highest priority could find a community that supports this kind of life. The stewardship model of religiously motivated action encourages people to take good care of the institutions that sustain particular expressions of Christian living. We see an example of this at St. Mary's College High School. We have inherited this school from previous generations of people who, since 1863, have given money and labor to support the school. Over time, the school has acquired property, sustained a community of donors, attracted teachers and families willing to entrust this school with the education of their children. It is also a ministry of the Brothers of Christian Schools. They hold the school in trust for future generations and hold the current leadership accountable to the standards they have set for their schools. Laws governing all nonprofit organizations tend to support the stewardship model. At times, Congress and state legislatures have created incentives in tax law for citizens to give donations to nonprofit organizations. And they typically exempt these organizations from taxation, provided they follow specific guidelines like not turning a profit, offering some form of social benefit, and opening their books to annual audits so they can report to the public how they use the donations they receive. Many nonprofit organizations today have endowments. According to federal law, nonprofit organizations can invest endowed funds and avoid taxes on their capital gains, provided they use 5% of the investment's earnings and capital each year to support their charitable work. In years where an endowment's invested funds grow more than 5%, they can decide either to reinvest these earnings or use them to support their work. Let's stop for a moment and take a look at some of the words we've been using here. Endowment, trust, taxation, leadership, routines, property, institutions, inheritance. This is not biblical language. It is not a specifically religious language, which raises a question. Is managing a nonprofit organization really an expression of religious faith? Stephen Pope turns to the creation stories in Genesis and reminds us that these stories charge the people who hear them to care for the earth, to tend it, to make fruit, to expand throughout the earth. The stories also name values, like making God an ultimate priority, making respect for human dignity a priority, second only to honoring God. Pope suggests that Christians who manage nonprofit organizations can make this work an expression of their faith when they do so in a Christian manner. Stewardship sustains the work of Christian charity. It begins with gratitude for the blessing God bestows through creation and through the support of people who support a specific ministry. It balances trust that God will continue to provide with managing a ministry's resources prudently and with wisdom. This model presents some challenges, such as clinging to an organization's resources or reputation to an extent that it neglects the needs of those whom they serve. People can also work so hard to support an organization that they burn out. Organizations can also hold on to routines that have been effective in the past, resist change, and miss out on real opportunities to innovate. The hospitality model, which Stephen Pope associates with Dorothy Day, is also a model Christians use to bring their religious values and beliefs into social life. This cultural practice is ancient. It predates Christianity, appears throughout the Bible, and throughout Christian history. Dorothy Day found inspiration for hospitality in the practices of Saint Benedict, who encourages the members of the monasteries to welcome all people as they would welcome Christ. Recall we have talked about a model for social life that highlights three social spheres: the public sphere of constitutional institutions, the civic sphere of nonprofit associational life, and the private sphere of friendship, family, and business. The stewardship model for bringing religion into social life unfolds in the civic sphere. Dorothy Day and the Catholic Worker and similar faith-based groups practice hospitality in the private sphere of family and friends. They do not treat Christian practice as something they perform outside of their home. Instead of building nonprofit organizations that support the work of Christian charity, the hospitality model builds intentional communities. These communities sustain a culture and practices that reflect Jesus' teachings. When we look at Jesus' teachings overall, we find a broad pattern of expanding our circle of kinship. Jesus speaks of treating all people as though they're part of our extended family. The hospitality model for Christian social action takes this seriously. Quite often, Christian communities who embrace the hospitality model also follow some of Jesus' specific teachings in the gospel. For Catholic worker communities, we often see this in the practice of table fellowship. Jesus welcomes at a table people whom polite society deemed unclean or unwelcome, including people who are ritually unclean, people with livelihoods connected with the Roman occupation, and public sinners. Catholic worker communities often welcome anyone who comes to a house of hospitality for a meal. One observer describes a Catholic Mass held at a Catholic worker house in Los Angeles. After the people receive communion, the table where they had gathered for Eucharist is cleared, and a large pot of soup takes the place of the Eucharistic bread and wine. Everyone present then eats a meal. This ritual connects the table fellowship of the Catholic worker with the table fellowship of Christ. Catholic worker communities focus their outreach on the works of mercy, provide food, hydration, clothing, and shelter to people who cannot meet their own needs. But the manner of their work is as important for the practices of the Catholic worker as the material resources they offer. The hospitality model places an emphasis on face-to-face interactions with the people whom the community serves. It encourages listening to guests and giving them a space to share their stories. Catholic workers hope that people who have been marginalized, dismissed, or moved along will rediscover a felt sense of their own dignity as children of God through the hospitality they receive. The hospitality model for putting faith into action has limitations and challenges. First, when we focus on people's immediate material needs for food, clothing, or shelter, we do not have the ability to offer care for complex conditions, such as addiction, mental illness, physical or developmental disability. Also, When we meet people's immediate needs, we focus less on the reasons people become vulnerable to begin with. The causes of homelessness, food insecurity, or poverty remain unaddressed. In addition, when we offer support in the context of face to face interpersonal relationships marked by compassion, we risk burning out and becoming unable to open our hearts to each and every person who asks for our help. Lastly, when the hospitality model guides our work, we can find it hard to sustain a relationship of equal respect between those who offer hospitality and those who ask for it. When those who need food, clothing, or shelter feel beholden to those who offer it, or when they have implicit expectations of the people they serve, they can become more controlling than loving. These two models, the stewardship model and the hospitality model, have roots in the same gospel message, but they move in different directions. The stewardship model builds nonprofit organizations, and the hospitality model builds intentional communities. While the stewardship model leads to the gathering of resources that sustain an organization, that sustains the work of charity, the hospitality model focuses on works of hospitality that meet people's immediate needs in the context of face to face relationships in a spirit of charity. Both models depend on the generous support of volunteer time and donations, but they manage these gifts in different ways. Catholic worker communities share as much as they can in any given moment and trust in divine providence manifested through the generosity of their supporters. The stewardship model manages resources for the long run, seeking to sustain a caring relationship for extended periods of time and to support a ministry for years or even generations to come.